Hey guys, welcome to the UFC fight prediction channel. This week's fights are pretty interesting and hopefully it will not end up being the card like last time around where two of the fights in the main card got cancelled and eventually the whole card was reduced to a 7 fight card, and that was kind of a bummer, especially when I had really high hopes for the 2 fights that got cancelled. I got my prediction for the Overeem Sakai fight pretty well, and the other 2 fights didn't go my way. I still ended up making some money last week, but not like the week before. So for this card, there are a few fights that I'm really looking forward to. Kamaworthy versus Ottoman Azaitar, Julia Avila, Sujara Eubanks. That's my favorite fight to bet. Even though Julia Avila comes as a big favorite, I think there's a betting opportunity there. I'm excited for the Billy Quarantillo fight. The guy is really exciting. He's fighting Kyle Nelson, so that fight is good. As you know, that these cards are really fluid. Fights are being changed. People are popping off COVID. So it's hard to maintain that the main card billing, and I'm not 100% sure which fights are going to be on the main card, but I'm breaking down. So let's go ahead and dive into the first one, which is going to be Alain Patrick versus Bobby Green. Now we'll talk about Alain Patrick first. So Patrick is coming into this fight with a pretty good 15-2 record, but he's been fairly inactive for his whole UFC stint pretty much. So in the last few years, he's had 5 fights between 2015 and 2018 and hasn't competed after. His last fight was against Scott Holtzman, and he came in as a big favorite at -320. But he was pretty much outclassed on the feet and then finished by ground and pound in the 3rd round. So this fight was in October of 2018. So he will essentially be coming in after 2 years and 4 cancelled fights in 2020. And whenever a fighter comes after a break, it's always hard to predict how he might look. Such an extended layoff, especially if they got outclassed and knocked out in the last fight, adds a little bit of uncertainty. Extended layoff should be good for recovery, considering that he was knocked out. Patrick's game plan is fairly simple. He comes out of the gate strong. He would throw flashy techniques, one shot at a time, and his strikes will be fairly long and very unorthodox to set up a takedown. And majority of his takedowns come close to the cage. Usually his entries are not that well set up, but for most parts he ends up getting takedown. He even got 9 takedowns against Damir Hatzovic, who has a decent wrestling defense. His pace doesn't slow as much considering the amount of effort he puts in. And I don't think that he's going to have a plan B in case his takedown game fails. And what we've seen is the 2 fights where he wasn't able to take the opponent down, he ended up getting knocked out in 2nd and 3rd round respectively against Mairbek Tasumov and Scott Holtzman. Now talking about Bobby Green. So Bobby Green is coming off of 2 good decision wins against Clay Guida and Lando Veneta, and he's definitely shown improvement in those fights. Bobby Green does not throw a lot of combinations, but he throws a really quick 1-2 from his waist, and he relies a lot on his head movement. With Patrick being extremely unorthodox in his strikes, relying just on head movement might not be the best idea, but having the hands down low can definitely help him in his takedown defense. Green has good wrestling, and he uses it to thwart takedowns to keep the fight standing for the most part. He has taken people down in the past, but they have usually been reactive takedowns. Holtzman was very effective with his inside low kick against Alain Patrick, so I think Bobby Green will also look to utilize inside leg kicks and outside leg kicks to exploit the wide stance that Alan Patrick has. He's susceptible to being hit, and all his attacks can be nullified with leg kicks by Bobby Green if he uses them correctly. The closest fight that I could pick in order to get clues on how Alan Patrick versus Bobby Green would go was the one between Green and Clay Guida. Guida was able to take down Green and easily lifting him and slamming him a couple of times in the first round, but couldn't hold him there. However, Green came in the second round to stuff those takedowns and dominate the stand-up thereafter. Whereas the third round was fairly close, but I think Green won the contest. Now, what this fight tells me are two big things. First, Alan Patrick is a much bigger man than Clay Guida and has much longer arms to just clasp his grip around Bobby Green, and it's going to aid him in his takedowns. If Patrick takes him down in more than one round, he is going to snap off. He's going to take the snap off of Green's punches, and he could easily win at least 2 of the 3 rounds that way. However, the second possibility I see is Green adjusts during the fight, and if he can thwart Patrick's takedown, then it might be an easy night for Bobby Green. Now, in summary, so off the bat, I'm going to tell you that this is not the best fight for betting, and I'll tell you why. Patrick is really good at taking his opponents down historically, but he doesn't have a plan B in case that doesn't work. The 2 fights he wasn't able to take the opponent down, he ended up getting knocked out. He's coming after 2 years, and his game could have been evolved, but he's also 37 years old and trains with some camp in the Amazonas, and I feel that he becoming really evolved may not be the case. Bobby Green has looked better and has a wrestling game to make Patrick earn those takedowns, and there is a fair bit of uncertainty how Patrick would react to being thwarted those takedowns. So to top it off, Green is coming at 2.5 to 1 favorite, and I can't bet on Green on those odds. In fact, if you were to put a gun on my head, I'd probably say Patrick by decision, considering the big payoff that might have. So I'd say stay away from this one. But if you want to bet, maybe go for Patrick by decision, because it is a possibility and that might give you a fair amount of money. So the next one is between Mike Rodriguez and Ed Herman. Now, Rodriguez is an extremely big guy for light heavyweight division with 6'4" and 82-inch reach. He has had a mixed showing in the UFC with 2 wins, 2 losses, and 1 no contest. He fights from the southpaw stance, and he uses his reach to good effect to throw straight punches, front and roundhouse kicks. However, like some of the overzealous explosive fighters, he has a hard time to keep his distance as he crashes into his opponent with the momentum he gathers during the attack. He also throws strong knees, and with his physique and length and power, they could be extremely deadly for opponents like Ed Herman, who are a couple of inches shorter. He throws elbows in the clinch from different angles and lands devastating knees. If you saw the fight that happened a few weeks ago with Marcin Prachnio, you could see how brutal his clinch game was. His takedown defense is not up to the mark, but he's had shown ability to scramble next to the cage and get up. He is extremely easy to take down when he's tired, and he did not show enough evidence to show that he was willing to go through hell, especially if you watch the fight against John Allen. He can be held against the cage and does not really show urgency to get his back off of the cage. Devin Clark was able to hold him next to the cage and to the ground and was able to tire him out. And this is something that Ed Herman will keenly have his eye on. Now, coming to Ed Herman, He's a veteran who spent most of his career at middleweight, but now has been fighting at light heavyweight in the last few fights. The frequency of his fights have decreased in the last couple of years, but he's coming off of two really good wins. Last one being a knockout win on Pat Cummins in the first round. Now, Ed Herman comes forward and he throws bombs. He has really good leg kicks and he throws really good knees up the middle as well. That's what he to knock out Pat Cummins. In my opinion, Ed's best chance is to look for takedowns, considering how green Rodriguez's ground game is. It might be hard for him to take Rodriguez down early, considering that Rodriguez's strength and long arm span too. So Herman's ground game is slick, even though he doesn't really use it as much as he ideally should. He has a good offensive and defensive wrestling, and is a jiu-jitsu black belt. So Herman can look to clinch with Rodriguez, making sure that Rodriguez does not get him in the clinch. And getting Rodriguez in the clinch is a risky position. Herman needs to push Rodriguez up the cage, not to offer him any room in order to win a clinch battle. If Herman is reversed, Rodriguez would look to do damage early through elbows and knees. So, in summary, this is a fight where a young and a physical Rodriguez fights the battle-tested and the veteran Ed Herman. Herman likes to push forward, but would have to deal with long jabs, front kicks, round kicks of Rodriguez. He can look to clinch, but that comes with its own danger, where Rodriguez has showed in his last fight that he could be devastating with elbows and knees. Herman should look to make Rodriguez overcome it on his strikes and then try to take him down. This will be hard to do in the first half of the fight when Rodriguez is fresh. If Herman could get Rodriguez tired by excessive clinching or even taking him down, Herman can win a decision or a finish by ground and pound. However, the most probable scenario in my mind is Rodriguez getting the TKO. Okay, so this next fight is between Kyle Nelson and Billy Hilo. So Nelson comes in at 5 feet 11 inches tall with a 71-inch reach and is coming off of a first-round knockout over Marco Polo Reyes. Nelson moved down from lightweight to featherweight division a couple of fights ago, and let's see how he does. For orthodox opponents, Nelson likes to time their leg kicks with a straight right. He has a bomb of an overhand right, and Billy Q needs to be extremely careful in engaging in a firefight with Nelson, especially when he's fresh. Nelson's striking looks really crisp, and he debuted in the UFC against Carlos Diego Ferreira, and Nelson was a big underdog in that fight. However, in the fight, Nelson was able to hurt Diego through punches and even a front body kick in the first round. So much so that Diego had to pull guard. Just to let you know how significant this is that Diego was able to outstrike Pettis before submitting him. So we know that Kyle Nelson's striking is pretty good. However, Nelson has a tendency to get restless and go for one haymaker too many, and that can drop his power bar pretty quickly. His ground game looks a little suspect, and the technique is lacking, even though it was against a ground killer like Diego Ferreira. He does need some work in the ground department. His takedown defense isn't the best either. Also, Nelson steps heavy on the front leg and is susceptible to leg kicks. Now, Billy Quarantillo is an exciting fighter. He's 5'10", and he's coming off of a hard-fought win over Spike Carlyle. Now, Billy Q is not a very powerful or a physical guy, but what he lacks in those departments, he makes it up with his extremely high output and his will to never give up. He has this forward pressure game that tires his opponents really quickly. And if you watch his fight in the Contender Series with Samuel Kirk or something like, I'm forgetting the name of the fighter, but you could actually see how forward pressure gradually tired his opponent from the beginning of the second round to the end of the second round to actually just a punching bag in the third round. Billy Q has a really good ground game, and his activity levels on the ground matches his activity levels standing. He constantly throws up his legs to look for arm bars, triangles, and when he isn't doing that, he's looking to land those sharp elbows to cut up his opponents and slow down their offense. Having said that, he does concede easy takedowns, especially when his opponents are fresh. However, it might be not that big of a consideration against Kyle Nelson, even though Nelson has shown that he can take you down if he's not really liking the striking exchanges. Billy Q might want to take this fight to the mat early to tire Nelson, the same way Diego Ferreira was able to do it in the first round itself. This might be the path for the least resistance for him. Billy Q pretty much loses at the first round against good competition, but then turns it on, and I think it might be the case in this fight as well. Billy Q has a really good ground game, and he's well versed with jiu-jitsu, as I talked about. He enjoys to scramble from the bottom, even when he's taken down. He's extremely calm under pressure, and the best part is he's aware that his cardio can outlast most low to medium and even higher level competition. Just summarizing this, Kyle Nelson has knockout power. He holds knockouts over Kama Worthy and Marco Polo Reyes, which is no small feat. But I think Kyle Nelson will come out strong, or alternatively be more measured. But when Billy Q pushes the pace, he will have to increase his output. Billy Q might initiate a takedown if he's taking too much damage. But either way, I see Nelson taking the first round and then Billy Q coming back in the second and taking over by pressure. I see this fight going as 29-28 for Billy Q, or even a finish late for Billy Q. Alright guys, this is one of my favorite fights on the card. It's between Julia Avila versus Sijara Eubanks. Now, the reason that I like this fight is because I think there's a clear path for betting here. So let's talk about Avila first. So Avila is 5'7" and has a really good frame for this division. She will enjoy height and reach advantage against Eubank. And she will probably have the strength advantage as well. Avila is probably the most aggressive fighter on the roster with a very educated clinch game. She knows how to reverse and keep the head pressure to restrict the movements of her opponents. She throws punches to close the distance and get into the clinch. The aggression is top-notch, but the entries are without disguise. And with this attitude that I'm going to be coming for you, do what you can, and I kind of like the approach, but it might get her into some trouble against opponents that are really up there, such as Amanda Nunes and so on. She controls her opponents against the fence to grind them, and as they try to separate, she throws a fly of hooks and elbows to get them defensive again, and then Avila clinches back again. So she keeps doing these cycles where the opponents are taking damage and are getting tired, while Avila is exerting her dominance. She in the clinch, she frames beautifully and usually has the more dominating position pretty much always. Avila also has really strong knees up the middle, and she hurt Penny Kianzad with those. I think she also hurt Gina Mazzani with a kick or a knee to the midsection before she finished it off with punches. Avila has a very linear attack. She throws 1-2 repeatedly as she rushes forward. And has a really sneaky front kick, and I think she'll be using it considering the fact that Shazara Eubanks is about 3 inches shorter than her. Another aspect about Julia Avila's game that makes her a great fighter is the fact that she has great cardio considering the output she puts on. She is always in a clinch, and her pressure is always high. And considering all those facts, I really think that her cardio is probably one of the biggest strengths in this fight. Julia's grappling looks good too. She has really good sprawls, and even on deep takedown attempts that Penny Kianzad had on her, she was able to thwart it and then take their back. Now coming to Eubanks. Eubanks is 35 years old, and she has faced a lot of good competition in the UFC. She's faced Aspen Ladd twice, Modafferi twice, Caitlin Chukagian, Betchy Correia, Lauren Murphy. List goes on. So Eubanks comes out fast with crisp combinations and won't hesitate to go for a takedown often and early. Even though her striking looks really good, especially the first half of her fights, her bread and butter is grappling, and she is expected to have a fair bit of advantage in the straight jiu-jitsu game, but I think with the size advantage that Avila has, it might not be as big of a concern. Eubanks always wins the first round of the fight, even coming close to finishing Correia and Ladd. But then she starts to gas out, and her output declines tremendously. Eubanks fights in orthodox stance and puts a lot of weight on her front leg, making her open to low leg kicks that Avila might throw. Eubanks' biggest weakness is her cardio. She looked tired in the third round with Lauren Murphy and looked fairly exhausted in the second fight against Modafferi as well. It could be attributed to a brutal weight cut for her in the flyweight division, but it didn't really change much when she moved up to bantamweight division. And even though her boxing looked really sharp with Betchy Correia, and she was about to finish Correia off, the second and the third round, she was easily outstruck by Correia, and she looked a little tired. How does this fight go? So this is probably the fight where I'm most confident about my pick. Avila has the complete toolbox to beat Eubanks. Eubanks' cardio is questionable, and Avila will sap her gas tank with her brutal clinch game. She's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, and even though Sujara Eubanks is black belt, Avila is a much bigger woman, and her strength will keep her out of danger if it hits the mat. I don't really see it going to the mat unless Avila wants it. And I think Avila is going to finish an exhausted Eubanks, probably in second or the third. Now the main event. This is between Michelle Waterson and Angela Hill. We'll start with Angela Hill. So Hill is coming into the fight losing a close split decision against Claudia Gadelha. Personally, I thought Hill won the fight fairly clearly. When Hill faces an opponent who's physically larger or stronger, such as Jessica Andrade and Ariane Carnelossi, she prefers to move backwards and cut angles to counter with straight punches and occasional hooks. Angela is showing marked improvement in her ground game, and she's climbing up the ranks in strawweight division. Angela does really good work in the clinch, and she uses good framing elbows to create distance when pushed against the cage. She uses her knees and elbows really well, and she cut Carnolesi with a nasty elbow that resulted in a doctor's stoppage. Angela displayed a really good sweep
to get Hannah Cyphers to the ground before finishing her with brutal ground and pound with those deadly elbows. She also has a really good step in elbows, and I think it's the bony elbows that could make a lot of difference in this fight against Waterson. Hill was taken down in the first round by Claudia Gadelha through a body lock takedown against the cage, and Waterson deploys similar takedowns with front headlock takedowns, and and she might not consider Hill to be a threat to take her back, even if she misses one of her takedowns. Angela Hill was able to drop Claudia with an overhand right, and she has shown that she has been improving tremendously since her time away from the UFC when she stepped away, went to Invicta, won the belt, and then came back, and she's looked a different fighter. Now talking about Waterson, Waterson is coming off of two decision losses, the last one being against Carla Esparza, and the one before against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Waterson relies on her movement to keep her distance. She enters the pocket to land and then just moves away. However, her lateral movement slows down somewhat as she moves into the second and the third rounds. Waterson throws a front leg side kick to control the distance, and she attacks thighs, body, and the face of her opponent, especially against fighters that are looking to close the distance. This technique is especially useful if the opponent is not cutting the cage and just following them. Waterson is good in scrambles and can land a reversal if the opponent is not careful. She's a very opportunistic fighter, and she looks to take her opponent down when she feels that there is an advantage for her on the ground, or if she feels threatened in the stand-up. She either uses a high crotch single leg takedown or a front leg judo throw to get her takedowns. Waterson also looks to utilize clinch against the cage to neutralize her opponent's striking. I was extremely surprised to see Waterson have a strength advantage in the clinch against a much bigger fighter in Courtney Casey. However, Felice Herrig looked much stronger than Waterson in the clinch, and I think Angela Hill will be stronger than Waterson in the clinch. Waterson has a good headlock throw where she uses the forward pressure momentum of her opponent to flip them to the ground. Waterson has really good elbows from the bottom when the opponent tries to take her down and end up in her guard. Waterson, having lost the last two fights, will be itching to get back in the Willem column. Now, to summarize this is a very close fight, and Waterson can really do well if she could control the distance with her kicks. And if Angela tries to close the distance, then she could look to take her down. The middle range is where Hill can use her Muay Thai, and that's where the most danger lies for Michelle Waterson. Waterson's recent form and low strike count in the last two fights makes me wary to bet on her. Hill, on the other hand, has been improving constantly, and there is a case to be made where she won all the last five fights she's fought. However, there were two decisions that did not go her way, and that's why in the last five fights she's 3-2. But if you ask me personally, I think Angela won all five of those fights. Hill striking, along with a clinch and ground game, has improved significantly, and I foresee Hill closing the gap to nullify Waterson's kicking game and land punches, and pursue to dominate clinch and deny Waterson easy takedowns. I see a decision or a late stoppage for Angela Hill.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please comment, share, and like, and I'll see you next Thursday for the next card. Thank you.